and they're like, what are you? I'm like, oh, I'm just like mixed. I'm like half black and like half white. But like really is a slightly more complicated than that. A lot of people like right off the bat assume that like because I'm mixed, they're like one of your parents is white and one of your parents is like black.
Yeah.
But like both my parents are mixed like me, and my mom, her grandfather is Nigerian, and her grandmother is Canadian. And with my dad, his father is Haitian, and my grandmother on that side of the family is also Canadian. So I'm like a quarter Haitian, a quarter Nigerian, and like 50% like Canadian, but like part of it's like Irish Canadian. It's weird. Not a lot. I mean, there's a lot of like Asian kids, right? But there's not a lot of black kids, and because of that, there's not a lot of like mixed black kids. And in essence, so I feel as like a black person, I feel like kind of underrepresented in the school. It's not the school's fault though.
Yeah.
More as black, just because it's a very interesting thing, and like I've been exploring it for like a long time because of how like I'm mixed. Like people like, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this like almost correctly. Because of like implicit bias and like racism in America, like I definitely like see that like in my family and with like personal experiences. So like I definitely sympathize. I definitely relate more to like the black side of me just because I don't have that white privilege. So it doesn't really like, sadly that part of me just like doesn't like come out as much. But at the same time, like when you go to places like Africa or when I've gone, it's just because like I'm super light skinned compared to everybody else there. I'm like considered white, so like my race for some reason is somewhat relative to where I am in the world. Here I'm very like black, and like there I'm like white, and it's very confusing. Or in some places I'm like, they'll call me like mixed, but like I went to Zanzibar and they're like, you're a half caste. I was like, excuse me? And they're like, yeah, you're half caste, right? I was like, yes, I think so. I was like, I had never heard that term before, half caste. I feel like it has a lot to do with like accepting like your own identity, because being like a kind of a little bit more of a passive child, like whatever label people gave me, I just didn't necessarily want to like fight that. So especially going to like Africa, like they're like, are you any part African? And I'm like, I have to be a little bit more assertive as like an older person and be like, yes, I am African, like this is what I am, but also I don't need to like explain it to you. Like I am, and just like deal with it. So it's like coming to terms with my like identity, especially just like a lot of it had to do with like how I present myself, like my like hair, because like as a child, I didn't necessarily like embrace the black side of me, like the curly hair, and I really wanted like straight hair and stuff. So like becoming more in touch with like my black side and my like African side, like I had to learn how to like use my hair, and that kind of showed how I was starting to get a little bit more comfortable with my identity as like a mixed child or like even black. One thing people get like mixed up a lot is like if they see like a black person, they're like, you can't call them black, it's African American. And you're like, well, not all black people are African American. So like, it's weird, but like black and African are the same thing, and then black and African American are the same thing, but African American and African are not the same thing. And like, technically, I'm African American because I was like born here, but also like not really, because like my ancestors weren't brought to the United States, they were brought to Haiti. So it's very weird and complicated, and like even like filling out college apps, I'm like, what do I put? Like, are you black? Okay, from where? I'm like, what do you want me to say? I don't know. So it's very hard to like fit me into like specific boxes. It's very much of like identity crisis every time I fill out forms. I'm like, I don't know. And like the first section of your college app should be like the easiest. Like, what's your name? Like, where are you from? And literally, I'm so confused. I'm like, I don't know. I gave up like 5 seconds into doing my college app because of that. I don't like it because people are so much more complicated than one specific box, and it kind of perpetuates the idea that like you can only fit into this, and if you don't, then you're not normal. Like, it's either you're white or you're Asian or you're black or you're like Latino, like, and if you don't fit into those like well-defined boxes, then like how do you're not normalized in like society. So I don't like it. I think we're kind of moving away from that as like people there are higher and higher concentrations of not just like people coming from like a specific lineage, like being like 100% like white or 100% like Mexican, like as we kind of spread across the world because of like modern day like travel and like technology and meeting new people and find out like new things. Like it's kind of, those lines are kind of being like broken down, but they're still there.
Yeah.
So a huge thing is like colorism, right? Because I'm like lighter skin, for some reason, and like the media, like it's perceived as like more beautiful. Like even if you like see like Bollywood actors tend to be like lighter skin, and it's just like it's not like colorism. So I face like racism or like implicit bias less than even my brother, who's like dark. He's a lot darker than me for whatever reason. We're both from the same family. But at the same time, I also face like criticism. So that's like a benefit of being like slightly like lighter skin. I don't like saying that, but it's like kind of true. A negative is that because I'm lighter skinned, sometimes black people or like African people will see me as less, like I don't necessarily belong to that group. They're like, well, you're not 100%, so like not really. Like you don't get where we're coming from. Like, are you really black though? And like even I get it from people who aren't like who aren't black, that are like my like friend who's like Indian, who like one day told me that like well, you're only half black, so technically you can only say half the N-word. And I'm like, that doesn't make I was about to go off a little bit, and it was meant as like a joke, but it's still like super irritating because it's that underlying idea that I'm like less, I don't belong to that group as much. I think as a kid, we just had so many different languages in our house because we had French, we had Spanish, we had like Creole, which is like a broken like French, and we had like English, and we also had like Igbo, which is like an African language. To the point where my brother thought that everybody in the house had their own language. So like as a 5-year-old, he decided that he was going to make up his own language. So very interesting. So there's so many different like cultures that I like grew up with. Right now it's primarily like French, with like a little bit of like African, a little bit of like Nigerian in there. I'm not really in touch with like my like Haitian side because my father never really got in touch with his, and my grandfather was like very far away, so his Haitian food is like so delicious, but I rarely get to like eat it, and like I don't know how to cook it, so that's sad. But I find that because there's so many like different like cultures and like distinct distinct like foods or like languages or like stories, I don't get them all because it's just like so much that how can you in like the short span of like your childhood. I mean, I'm gonna have my mom around hopefully, and I'm gonna beg her to teach my kids Igbo because she never taught me Igbo. I literally don't know how to like say like 3 phrases and that's it, and it's sad and depressing, and she never taught me, and I'm angry at her for it. But and then French. And then I'm not necessarily sure about the Haitian side just because like I'm not super in touch with it. It's very interesting.